Well, praise the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We are about to look at how he freed the Israelites from Egypt. Now, we've seen all the plagues, but I want to do some geek stuff before we get going. Like, how long did the descendants of Abraham live in Egypt? Think about it. I mean, what have you been told? What do you think? 400 years? That is what most people will say. And when we studied the story of Abraham, if you remember back then, we got a hint at 400 years, but Exodus 12:40 tells us they were in Egypt 430 years to the day. That means they went to Egypt in the spring because that's when they left. We'll come back to that. But before we continue our look at the life of Moses, I want to take a serious look at how many Israelites there were. I know I gave you a brief look at it previously. I want to take a second more detailed look at it. At the end of Genesis, we learned that there were 66 in the family, Jacob and his immediate family, and they joined Joseph in Israel for a total of 70. Joseph, his wife, and 2 children. Now, how many Israelites left Egypt? Preachers like to throw out some numbers like 1 or 2 million, and those seem like the most commonly used, and, that's not necessarily wrong. I'm just going to give you a hint, though. I usually say about 5 million. Really? So let's see if we can get a solid concept of how many Israelites left Egypt. In the book of Numbers, we're told, chapter 1 tells us that there were 603,550 men able to go to war. Now that would exclude the Levites, and if we add the Levites in, that means there's 663,905 men. That's Exodus 1 and 2. So let's assume there was one woman per man, and each woman had 2 children. That would be 1,327,810 children, or 2,655,620 people. Hey, not bad. But children were prized, so they probably had more than 2 children per each couple. Jacob had 12 boys plus some girls. But let's say there were 4 children per couple. That'd be 3,983,430 people total leaving Egypt. 6 children per couple, 5,321,240, and 8 children per couple, 7,966,860 people leaving Egypt, not Israel, leaving Egypt. Is that stretching your belief? I want to take a look at it from a little different perspective. This time, let's remember that men tended to die younger just because of their lifestyles. And Pharaoh had all the baby boys killed probably for several years, maybe quite a few. Since having children was very important, a man with more than one wife could have more children. Also, men having multiple wives was important for the women. It was important for the women because they had no way to support themselves. So they needed a husband in that society. So let's say each man had 2 wives. It is possible that each man had 3 wives or more, but that is probably less likely because slaves would have trouble supporting more wives and children. Besides, I don't want to blow your minds with those numbers, because listen to these. Each man, 663,905, had 2 wives, 1,327,810 women. If they each had 2 children per wife, that would be 2,655,620 children, for a total number of Israelites of 4,647,335, and that's assuming just 2 children per wife. 4, 6, and 8. 9,294,670, 4 children per wife. 6 children per wife, 13,942,005. 8 children per wife, plug your ears, you don't want to hear this. 18,589,340 people leaving Egypt. 2.5 million with just one wife and 2 children per man. 18.5 million with each man having 2 wives who each gave birth to 8 children. Yeah, that one's probably stretching it, I think. What do you think? Did you believe Moses was leading millions of Israelites out of Egypt? Even if the Egyptians caused far more deaths than we imagined, if we cut the lowest of those numbers in half, then Moses led more than 1 million Israelites out of Egypt. I'm thinking it was a lot more than 1 million. Side note, there were roughly 2.5 million colonists at the time of the American Revolutionary War. Hey, we did a pretty good job for 2.5 million. Oh, wait. Israel was that big or maybe bigger? Put those numbers in perspective. New York City today has a population of around 8.5 million people. Los Angeles has a population of nearly 4 million. We're just talking about the city, not the metropolitan area. There's no other city in the United States that has over 3 million residents. Chicago with 2.7 million is the third and the only other city with a population of over 2.5 million people. That's half of my guess for the number of Israelites. How about another example? You think that's too many people? Well, this stat I found in an obscure place, I forget where, but some camping experts calculated that for 3 million people to try and camp in one location, they would require a campsite that was 5 miles long by 5 miles wide. That's 25 square miles. That's assuming their campgrounds are fairly ordered and very close together. People, no matter how you look at it, that's a lot of people, and hopefully understanding that will give you a greater appreciation for the vastness of the changing from being slaves ruled by the Egyptians to becoming a nation led by Moses. So, another geek thing. When was the first Passover? Well, Exodus 12:2, what time of year is what I'm asking. Exodus 12:2 tells us that God set the Passover month as the first month of the Israelites' calendar year. But the actual Passover was on the 14th day of the month. What calendar was that? You know? Well, probably the Egyptian calendar. Makes sense. For various reasons, it's difficult to determine which month, Egyptian month it was. The best guess I can give you is a month called Pachons. The other possibilities are Pini, Epiphi, and Mesor. Those are the 4 months of what they call the sowing season. We would call it springtime. I suspect that it was Pachons because that was the first month of spring, if you will. The Israelites left Egypt on the 15th day of that month because the Passover happened at midnight on the 14th day, so the Israelites left on the 15th day. In Deuteronomy 16:1, the Israelites were told to guard the month of Aviv. Aviv? I don't know. But if you look at the modern Jewish calendar, there's no month named Aviv. That's because the name has changed to Nisan today. All right, Passover. God told Moses what the Israelites were to do in order to prepare for their departure from Egypt. We're not going to go into all those details. That is a whole nother series of lessons. Moses, talking to the people, says, "Do you believe God has sent plagues on Egypt in order to free you from Egypt?" And all the people are screaming and shouting in jubilation. Moses said, "Then obey every single command God has given you and obey them exactly. If you do not, every firstborn in your family will die. On the morning after this final plague, we will leave Egypt." And the people are all screaming and shouting in jubilation. Yay! At midnight on the 14th day of the month, all the Egyptian firstborns died. Do you think maybe some of the Egyptians tried to obey all the commands God gave the Israelites to avoid being inflicted by this plague? I mean, do you think if they did, do you think God would have passed over their families? Have you ever thought about that? I have. I just don't have an answer for you. It's okay, Bible student. Think when you read. Wonder. Sometimes what you wonder about today, you'll find an answer in another book later. I don't think that one's in there, though. So anyway, after the plague hit at midnight, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron immediately. Pharaoh said, "Leave my people. Leave my land. You and all of your people. Go, worship your God. Take all your people and animals and leave. But bless me first." What's up with that? Well, 4 times before this night, Pharaoh asked Moses to pray for him. The Hebrew word there was basically ask your God. I translated pray for him. It has intercede would be a good word. We find that word in Exodus 8 after the plague of the frogs, and then again after the plague of the flies. It also appears in Exodus 9 after the plague of hail, and Exodus 10 after the plague of locusts. In this passage, however, Pharaoh asked Moses to bless him. It's a different Hebrew word. It does indeed imply what we would call a blessing. And don't just skip over this, people. In their culture, this implies that Moses was either a superior person or some sort of mystical magician with great mystical powers. So in the morning, the Israelites followed Moses out of Egypt. When Pharaoh and his officials heard the Hebrew slaves were gone, Pharaoh's officials all gathered in his throne room. Official 1, "Why did you let the slaves leave?" Official 2 says, "How are we going to replace so many slaves?" Official 3 says, "How are we going to get any work done?" And they were all talking at the same time, and Pharaoh was shouting, "Quiet! All of you! Silence!" "Prepare my army and my war chariot. Everyone prepare, and we will bring them back. They can't travel very fast with all those women and children and animals. We'll leave in 2 days, and we'll bring them back quickly." Now the Israelites traveled for 3 long days before making camp on the west shore of the Red Sea. God's angel led them in the form of a great and awesome cloud. They just followed the cloud. The last of their people didn't arrive until late in the 4th day. Everyone had celebrated all the way. However, a band of young men had been trailing behind everyone, to make sure everyone was okay and keeping up and didn't fall behind. One of them came to Moses. His name was Joshua. He said, "Moses, I've been traveling with several hundred young men. We have been trailing behind everyone. Well, we wanted to make sure everyone was doing fine." Moses, "That's a fine idea. Well, thank you for doing that." Joshua, Moses, we might have a problem. Moses, that's okay. Just tell me what the problem is. Well, you see, I think the problem is that, well, all the young men that were with me are talking to everyone now. Moses said, why is that a problem? Well, here's the problem. It's what they're telling everyone. That's the problem. Moses says, young man, I like you, but you seem to be not telling me what you want to tell me. Just say it straight out. I'm not going to be angry with you. Joshua said, okay, this afternoon we saw a large cloud of dust behind us. I sent 20 of our very fastest runners back to see what was causing all that dust. Moses, don't stop there. Continue your story. Joshua, yes. Well, just before we came to camp, they returned. And, well, the cloud is being caused by, it seems like it's being caused by, Moses sternly, Joshua. Yes. They said it's being caused by an army, Pharaoh's army. Moses said, what? Are you sure? Joshua said, yes, absolutely sure. I challenged them on that, and they were very sure. They are also very frightened, and they are talking to everyone right now. Right about then, Moses could hear wailing throughout the whole camp. The people surrounding Moses started shouting, we should have stayed in Egypt. I told you to leave us alone and let us serve the Egyptians. Yeah, and at least we had something to eat. We're safe. Now they're going to kill us. Moses was waving his arms. People, calm down. Why are you afraid? Don't you remember how God freed you? By his power, miraculous power, he freed you. Do you think he did all of that just to let you die? People were grumbling. Moses said, listen to me. Listen to me. I am telling you right now, the Egyptians you see behind us, you will never see again. God will take care of them. You wait and see. Moses went out by himself, as much as that was possible in that crowd. Moses said, God of my fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Almighty God, hear me now. I do not know what to do. What do I tell your people? God said, why are you complaining to me? Just tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff, stretch your hand out over the sea, the waters will dry, and Israel will be able to cross on dry ground. The Egyptians will follow them when I allow them to. Then everyone will see that I am indeed the God of unlimited power. Well, as Moses and the people watched, the angel who had been the cloud which they followed moved right over the top of them and came down to the ground which they had just crossed over. It was now between them and the Egyptians. Throughout the night it stood between the armies of Egypt and the people of Israel. The Egyptians were kept in the dark, and the Israelites had light. And as the cloud finished, Moses stretched out his hand and staff over the sea. A strong east wind separated the sea so that dry ground was there for Israel to cross on. It wasn't even muddy. The first to cross were a little intimidated by the walls of water on both sides, but as they started to cross, they began laughing and dancing and celebrating as they crossed. Others followed until all of Israel had crossed. Did you realize that Moses stretched out his staff and that he did it at night? Did you realize that God caused a mighty wind to blow all night? Sure, he could have made the crossing dry immediately, but he chose not to. Why? Think about it. What do you think it would have been like for the Israelites to hear that wind blowing all night long? A very strong east wind. Or did you think Moses just waved his hand and the crossing was dry? Well, after Israel had crossed over, a cloud angel lifted and crossed over to continue leading them. As they neared the other side of the sea, the Israelites became frightened because they saw the Egyptians, until God told Moses to stretch his hand out over the sea again. When Moses did, the two walls of water collapsed on top of the Egyptian army. For all of those that believe, the Israelites crossed over a narrow, shallow, sea-ish type place. Pay attention. It was not narrow because the entire army of Egypt was in the crossing when they all died from the violence of the massive walls of water collapsing on them. Personally, I do not believe any of them drowned. As so many believe, they all drowned. I believe they died from the violence of the walls of water collapsing on them. Massively tall walls of water. Now, the Bible tells us that after this crossing and the destruction of the Egyptian army, many of their dead bodies were seen by Israel on the seashore. After all of that, the Israelites began to fear God, and they began to fear Moses. Imagine how they felt when they saw Moses wave his hand and the sea provides a crossing. And then he waved his hand again and the Egyptian army was wiped out. It's no wonder they began to fear him. After all, what kind of man can do these things? Now, our study is about Moses, and he is not an ordinary man. It is difficult to imagine being one of the Israelites going through all of this. Now try and understand what it would have been like for Moses. The people are following him, and he is following God. His faith was not just his faith in God, but it was actually the faith that the Israelites were learning. His sister Miriam led all the women in a song of praise. You can find it in Exodus 15. Horse and riders fell into the sea. Moses led Israel then from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding any water. When they came to Marah, they couldn't drink the water because it was so bitter. So people complained to Moses. What are we supposed to drink? We're going to die of thirst now. Moses called out to God, "Oh, God, what do I do?" God showed Moses, "See that piece of wood there? Throw it in the water. It'll be fine." It was fine. The people could drink the water. And God says, if you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all of his laws, he will not bring on you any of the diseases he brought on the Egyptians. For I am the Lord who heals you. They left Marah and came to Elim, where there were 12 wonderful fresh springs and 70 palm trees, and they all camped around the springs of Elim. What a mighty God we serve. What a mighty God we serve. Angels bow before him. Heaven and earth adore him. What a mighty God we serve.